and the overhaul of litigation. So Vicky were explaining about his work when compared to that of his mentees, Stuart and Mill.
Yes, and I was saying that the process was the John Stuart Mill, for example, was constantly trying to reconcile the irreconcilable within Bentham's utility theory, namely that make most people happy, but you can't make all people happy. So what happens to the unhappy people? And and that's the same with Karl Popper, who tried to come up with a minimization of suffering and maximize happiness or whatever. So that's been the problem. I was trying to show how that would apply in the era of mass mediation, which is the most flexible, I think, of the different ADR types. Determinative, early neutral evaluation, again indicative, whereas mediation is the ultimate flexibility, the non-binary solution, as it were. And that's why I think it's become the most popular form of ADR. And my point was that on a micro level, you could look at it and say, well, look, the outcome of this case has been much better for the parties than it would be had you gone to the binary trial in the traditional way. And that might be true, but what happens if you then start putting 100,000 cases, or I don't know, let's say 500,000 cases through pre-court mandatory mediation? What happens then? Do you have enough mediators? Do you have enough mediation advocates? Are these mediations to be arranged, as they have been in England and Wales, by telephone and email, both of which are 20th century forms of technology? How is that to be done? So you need legal technology, and you need to understand that the people need to be brought with you in consultation. So you've got those three things working together. And in the macro sense, you need to be able to evaluate success. What is the criteria? Is it simply that waiting times to first hearing are reducing? Because that might happen because you're simply resolving the cases, but are the people actually happy? And this is what drove Bentham in his way of boiling everything down to look at the philosophic calculus, or hedonistic calculus, as it's been called, to try and work out, which some say those calculi don't work at all. So we need a process built into evaluation. We need empirical evidence. And again, that's where legal technology can help, but it has to be used at the beginning. So if you're going to say, right, pre-court mandatory mediation, managed online, but the requirement is to have data collection, pseudonymized data collection from the outset, so you understand about the user journey. And it's quantitative and it's qualitative evaluation that's needed, and that needs to be done on a routine basis. And then you then have to see what that produces. Give it a go for 2 years and see where you stand after that. It's never been done really before. Never really been done. The comparison, I suppose, is with the eBay, which is said to resolve 60 million disputes a year. But that is such a limited slice, as it were, of the population. It's the issue is I didn't get my stuff doesn't work. I want to return my stuff. I want my money back. These are very, very simplistic issues. Does it work in the real world? That's what I'm hoping to.
I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I think if the government and some jurisdictions, state or private funded ADR centers, if they can provide funds for the ADR institutes, because the research I had done previously, one of the findings was the lack of funds. If they could sort of even in England and Wales and other jurisdictions, if they could sort of give the amount of attention that they give to the courts, to litigation, and fund it, especially when it comes to the legal technology as well, I think it's going to stand the test of time, and of course people would opt for it.
Absolutely.
Make it their first mode of option than going to the courts, honestly. And create another findings was lack of awareness as well. That's why I started my podcast, So I think these two also are very important, funding and awareness.
And as you know, I reviewed your book recently, comparative analysis of ADR in jurisdictions, Nigeria, and the US. And I was very interested by the empirical evidence you produced as to the of public awareness in different states in the US.
Because it's when we talk about ADR, we think everybody knows about ADR because we have the we have us talking about ADR as educated people, but when you go to the streets, masses, they do not know about ADR. Honestly, I was like, really? So there is much more work to be done to sort of educate people that are not laymen. Would I put it that way?
Just to illustrate that point, there is a movement in England and Wales that you will be aware that we have to call ADR something else now. And the longest abbreviation I've found, which may amuse your viewers, is let's see if I get this right, NCBDRPS, which is non-court-based dispute resolution process systems, I think. And that's favoured by the Civil Mediation Council. Thankfully, when they amended the civil procedure rules, they stuck with ADR. But typically when I meet people at receptions or in dinner parties, they inevitably ask me what I do. And I then explain, and they kind of like glazed look comes over the face. My platform manages ADR. And they want to say, and I said, well, it's mediation. They said, oh, right. And then they move on to something else. But I'm used to it, it's fine. But the point is, it's exactly what you know. People know what ADR is. Some people know what mediation is. But
I think when you talk about informal methods, they sort of have a clue. Okay, some of them will be like, can you explain better? But it sort of gets their attention. They would stop because when it's on street interview, some of them are busy going to wherever they are going to, and if you want to talk to them about ADR, when you talk about ADR, no, they don't want to hear you. But when you say, oh, I want to talk about the informal methods of settling this, okay, gets them, okay, waiting for a few minutes, and then you land. And I talk about peacemaking. Have you heard about peacemaking? And then it sort of gets... It works a little bit, but ADR, most people don't know about it, and the masses. And if you see some of my LinkedIn connections as well, because most of them are not in our field, it's doing my posting and talking about ADR that they get to know about ADR. So it's important about educating the public and simplifying what ADR is.
Yeah. I think in terms of simplifying, there's a particular way of looking at it that brings together Bentham and the Bible. And it's this, that what you have to look at what Bentham was trying to...
I think I lost you here. Sorry. Not yet, I can hear you. Let's wait for a few minutes and see. The internet is a bit unstable from my end.
You can.
Okay, yeah.
As I do. In which litigation was really for the litigators, and the system was not intended that way. The litigation was made for the people, not for the litigators. And that I first came across that when I was doing some research in the archive of the Solicitor's Journal at the British Library, and that was an adaptation of a passage from the second chapter in Mark, the Gospel of Mark, at verse 27. And there, of course, the application there is to the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for the people, not the Sabbath, not the people for the Sabbath.
The Sabbath, yes.
Yeah, interesting to see how that was adapted in 1857. If you want the reference, I'll dig it out for you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Oh, right. Well, I'll send it to you. But it was such, I think it's such a powerful way of looking at it. And that, I think, is what Bentham saw. He saw a system being created for the lawyers, perpetuated by the lawyers. He said, you can buy delay in the courts just as much as you can buy a piece of broadcloth. You can buy as much broadcloth as you want. You can have, as you were saying earlier, Chinwe, you can have endless applications and so on and so forth, and spin things out. And that was certainly the case in Chancery, and we all know the battles to fuse equity and common law. That was the ultimate fudge. But largely, Bentham never really saw his ideas work out. I mean, the great County Court Act of 1846, which modernised the original county courts, was, if you like, an application of his theory of principle of happiness, namely that you must make it simpler, and it became a victim of its own success, of course, but that's always been the way. But yeah, so he resonates with us still. As I mentioned earlier, there's a book has only just come out last week, research papers on.
Oh, that would be great. I would want to have a look. And some of his views, he introduced empirical evidence. He talked about, instead of using the punitive measures, that parties can sort of have the informal sort of method of settling dispute, talk things out, sort of restorative justice, as opposed to punitive measures, and also compromise and collaboration as well.
Yeah, we have but scraped the surface of Bentham's thinking. And as you say, his influence is enormous. And so you're right to be, I don't know about popularising it, but you're right to be referencing it in your podcast. And I'm delighted to have not very often I get the opportunity to come and talk about my friend Jeremy Bentham.
So what do you think about ADR being as a standalone? How can his teaching contribute to using ADR as a standalone option?
Well, what I say about that is that I go back to my idea of having mandatory mediation in the pre-court phase. We've now had the final report, as you know, of the pre-action protocol review working group published in November last month, and that I imagine is going to be, the recommendations will be implemented, if not in April, then in October 2025 in England and Wales, which introduces exactly that, mandatory ADR. People can choose. We won't get into the detail of that, but the point is that it is to be the only way you can cope with about 2 million disputes, civil disputes, that don't include family or tribunals, civil disputes in England and Wales, is if you massively ramp up the number of mediators and mediation advocates, and you manage everything online. And that's, I think, the where Bentham drives this is that is the happiness principle. It is saying you've got millions of people trapped in the bog at the moment with no prospect of a way out, tormented by it, lives disrupted, lives and livelihoods blighted, as I often put it. And this really pre-court is the solution, is the way in which the backlog can be busted. Not just in England and Wales, but also in Kenya and Nigeria, and indeed Pakistan, not anywhere else.
Thank you so very much. So for what you've said, from what I hear you say, is that we have hope that Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism can actually work. Of course, if we invest jurisdictions in England and other countries would find the time to invest time, funding, and more research, and see how we can collate the two, to give us better or effective method of settling disputes via ADR. So thank you so very much for sharing your insights and perspective. I'm so grateful. This is a masterclass, and I'm really happy that we got on to this, because it's sort of it's not a new research. So many people have talked about Jeremy Bentham and utilitarianism, but I mean, we are now looking at it from the ADR side, which is a little bit new. So
Bentham's ideas are ideas for every century.
Oh yeah, he's like, I always say that he's like the man that Nostradamus, the man that saw tomorrow. He can be likened to that. He saw tomorrow, but he didn't he vocalize it a little bit, but he didn't mention ADR. But from all his teachings and his philosophy, you could see that he was going towards ADR, but he didn't give a name to that. So, but
well, we all know what he was talking about.
Yeah,
but I've been really humbled by this second invitation and honoured in equal measure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tony. I'm so grateful having you. Bye, cheers. Do have a lovely day.